This past Sunday was Mother's Day. I visited my mom for the first time since this pandemic began. I stayed for dinner and we reminisced about when I was a child. As we ate, my mom brought up a period in my life that I had forgotten. When I was 5, my parents split up. My mom no longer wanted to live with my drunken father, took me and moved into a dingy apartment building on the other side of town. Some would call it the bad side of town. Others refer to it as the old town. Though this neighborhood did have higher rates of drug use and theft, it was in fact the oldest part of town. The building and houses that stood there were built somewhere in the 1800s. A lot of history happened in that area. I remember being taught in school years later that the jailhouse for the area was not far from where I had lived. Many convicted felons were put to death there. The building that we moved into was small. I think it was 4 stories high with a basement laundromat. On each floor there was 5 doors and a garbage trap door. Halfway up the wall that led to a dumpster somewhere. 4 of the doors led to apartment, and the 5th door led to the stairwell. There were no elevators. I'm not sure if all of the apartments looked the same, but the one my mom and I had was very small, 1 bedroom. The plan was to live there for a year while we saved up for a better place, but the year was cut short by events that I had forgotten. A few weeks after we had moved in, my mom said I started complaining about the man that stood near the entrance of our building every day. I had told her he made me feel scared. I still don't remember telling this part. What confused my mom was that there was no man that stood near our building. Once I had told her about him, she tried to get me to point him out, but he suddenly stopped appearing. My mom then went on to tell me about the day in the park 3 months later. The man had visited me, she said, as she spoke details of that day. Started coming back to me. A block or 2 from our building was a park, a large green space with a baseball diamond in one corner and a playground in the other, with park benches dotting the walking paths that zigzagged through the grass. My mom took me there to play a few times a week. It must have been a weekday because the park was deserted. There was one other kid there, but he left shortly after we arrived, leaving me to climb around my own. My mom sat down on a bench not far from me, started reading a magazine, and shouted at me to stay close. I remember swinging around on the monkey bars when I noticed a man sitting on the swings, swaying back and forth. The swings were on the other side of the jungle gym from Mom. I doubt she had a good view of them from where she was seated. I remember my heart racing when I noticed him, and it sped up even faster. When he looked up at me, I dropped from the bar and I was hanging from and ran into a tunnel that led under the playground. The end of the tunnel brought me to an almost completely closed space. There were only 2 exits back through the tunnel, or to my left under a half wall that led back towards my mother. To my right, facing the swings, was a prison bar-like wall, and in front was one of those plastic tic-tac-toe games. I came out of the tunnel and turned to go under the half wall when I heard him quietly say, "Stop." I turned my head to the right and he was there on the other side of the bars. I froze. He had the top half of his hand pushed through the bars, reaching towards me. Only his fingers were able to make it through. His knuckle was caught between the 2 bars. Just before his thumb began, I stood there, body still, turned, ready to run under the wall, terrified to take my eyes off the man. "Come here, I need your help," I remember him saying, motioning for me to come towards him without his outstretched fingers. I slowly turned my body towards him, but didn't move closer. When I closed my eyes, I can picture him like he's right in front of me. His hair was dirty blonde and long, hung past his chin. A tattered, sunburnt straw hat rested on his head, casting a shadow on his eyes. His face was clean shaven, so I could see the constant smirk puckering on the left side of his mouth. He was wearing a thick wool sweater, old fabric pants, and black boots. I strangely recall his fingernails. They were very clean and kept well. I recall him saying something along the lines of, "You are looking very pretty today. Could you do me a favor?" "My mom says I shouldn't talk to strangers," I replied. He tilted his head to the right and smirked grew a little. "My name is Alec. What's yours?" he asked. I did not reply. I was still frozen, staring at him. "It's not polite to ignore someone," he said, the smirk on his face disappearing slightly. "If you help me, you can have this bag of candy," he said as he brought one of the biggest bags of candy I had ever seen out from behind his back. I remember a huge smile forming on my face and taking one step closer to him before realizing what I was doing. As I stepped closer, his smirk came back in full force. "Come back through the tunnel and you can have some while I tell you what I need your help with," he said, removing his hand from between the bars and pointing towards the tunnel. He shuffled his feet a little, moving closer to the tunnel and me. "I just need to go ask my mom," I remember saying, and turned to run towards my mom. As I turned, the man barked an order at me in a voice I can only describe as a soul shrinking. "Get back here, you little pig," he screamed at me. I froze, scared to move. I remember hoping my mom heard his bark and would come investigate, but before I could realize she wasn't coming, I felt his fingers wrap around my wrist. My head whipped around to look at my wrist. The man had gotten his hand through the bars and was squeezing me with a lot of force. I looked up to see that he is now open-mouthed, smiling with his teeth clenched together. I could see his eyes glowing under the shadow of the hat. "Scream and you'll regret it," he barked again. Me being 5 didn't listen. I let out an ear-piercing scream. Scream must have surprised him because I was able to yank my arm away quickly, duck under the wall, and dash for my mom. She was already up and off the bench, moving quickly towards me. From there, my mom said I started screaming about the man, but no man was in the area. My mom ran around the playground, looking up and down the paths in every direction, and there was no one. While my mom ran about, I stood near the bench shaking and looking around frantically. I remember hearing my mom scream, and within seconds she was on me, holding my arm. I looked down and see my arm dripping in blood, with 4 scratches running across my wrist. The next thing I remember, I was in the hospital, getting my arm stitched up, and my mom was talking to some police officers. As these details came back to me, the color must have left my face because my mom paused and asked me if I was alright. I didn't want to tell her what I had just remembered. I shook it off and reassured her I was fine. She went on to tell me the police did ask me some questions. I had told them he had a big bag of candy in a straw hat, and that he had gotten his hand through the bars and grabbed my wrist. With all the memories that just came back to me in detail. I wonder why I didn't tell the police more. Maybe at the time I was in shock, and those were the key points I could remember. Either way, the police were not able to track this man down. There were 3 other reports of a man in a straw hat in the area that day, but the police found no other leads. There was one more event that happened that tipped my right over the edge. It's the reason we left the apartment early than planned. The apartment my mom and I shared was only 1 bathroom. We shared a room, we did not share a bed. One night, about 4 months after the park incident, my mom woke up and I wasn't in bed. She left the bedroom and walked into our living room, where I was standing with 1 foot out the balcony door. She ran over and grabbed my shoulders. She spun me around so I was looking at her, but my eyes were glazed over. She assumed I was sleepwalking, so she led me back to bed and tucked me in. She woke again 4 hours later and peered over in my direction. She said there was someone standing over me. That person had pulled my blanket back and looked like they were bending down to pick me up. My mom, scared and not knowing what to do, grabbed the alarm clock from her bedside table and threw it as hard as she could at the figure. As she did this, she jumped off her bed, and grabbed the baseball bat she kept under it. She stood up, and the figure had somehow dodged the clock, picked me up, and was now running out of the room with sleeping me in its arms. My mom followed close behind. The figure moved quickly in the dark towards the balcony. My mom reached the figure as it was opening the balcony. She swung with all she had and collided not with the figure but with the glass door on the other side of it. The bat went through it. As the glass shattered, I dropped to the floor, getting small cuts from the glass all over my body. I woke up and abruptly started screaming. My mom dropped the bat and grabbed me, holding me close while she frantically looked around trying to find out where the figure had gone. She picked me up, grabbed the cordless foam from the kitchen and locked us in the bathroom. She called the cops and reported a break-in and attempted kidnapping. The cops were there within 5 minutes. They knocked on the door announcing the arrival and asking for the door to be unlocked. From there, my mom said the police did an investigation but could not find any evidence showing there was any kind of break-in other than the shattered glass door that my mom had explained. I was checked over, and to my mom's horror, Child Protective Services were contacted. Days later, my mom had packed our things. We moved to a new town entirely. When I was asked my mom why she had never talked about these events before, she said that her family laughed at her and made her feel crazy. When she told them she had decided to stop talking about it entirely, and I hoped I would forget, and I had until now. Since Mother's Day, I haven't been able to get that man out of my head. Every time I close my eyes, he's there. Whenever I sleep, he's there. Who could he have been? Why was he so interested in me? Where did he go? Was he the figure my mom saw? Is my mom crazy? I have so many questions, and very little in the ways of getting answers. Finn.